for folks 2 hours behind to be chiming in on the Super Bowl there from Vegas, maybe toward the end of the show. Big college basketball weekend, big college basketball night tonight that we'll get into certainly throughout the show here. We'll have Shreyas Laddha join us, KU Insider. Be good timing for him to talk about KU's best performance of the year going into the first round of the Sunflower Showdown. So looking forward to that. That's coming up a little bit later in the show. We will give away some HTO here today as well, as we always do. And we'll have lots coming for you. Lots of programming coming up on the network tonight, as well as that basketball game. Looking forward to it. It's the late Monday, big Monday window, so you'll have to stay up late for it tonight. Tommy, how are you this morning?
I'm good. Busy weekend. The Pro Bowl yesterday. Did you watch any of it?
No.
Neither did I. Didn't watch a single minute of it.
I love the new format. I mean, I have nothing against it. I like the format better now to do more skills. I remember as a kid with the Pro Bowl, I've never, and I love Major League Baseball's All-Star Game, and that's about it. So like in the NBA, I would rather see the 3-point contest and the dunk contest than the actual All-Star Game. Back in the day in the NFL, you would get these skills challenges when they had it in Hawaii every year. I thought those were cooler than the actual game. I think the home run derby is as cool as the All-Star game in Major League Baseball. So I like the new format. Look, it's a smart thing to do. You've got the Mannings as the coaches. That's fun. Someday you'll have the Kelseys as the coaches. That's fun. Like all of that is good. Getting former NFL guys to coach. I like it. I just know I didn't watch it. Didn't catch any of the Grammys last night either. Actually, I
didn't watch any of it.
I caught the tail end of Miley's performance as I turned it on to record the rest, and then I'll save it for my wife. We like to fast forward and get through the performances. It was funny timing for me because I flipped it on. I caught the tail end of a Miley performance, and I'm in on Miley Cyrus. I think she's way cool. And then it got right into the Country Music Award. And for the first time in forever, I knew who they were. I was like, Zach Bryan and Tyler Childers are up for Country Music Art. Like, this is awesome. Now, neither of them won, and the woman that won it is cool. And
Lainey
I think
Wilson,
the women,
she's awesome. Yeah, she's
the
incredible.
women in country in general right now are way cool. But these other guys that I do listen to, they're now making it into the mainstream. So I have all this great hope for Nashville. I was happy to see them. And I don't know if either of them won any other awards later on. I have no idea, but.
Well, and speaking of country, I mean, that performance, Luke Combs and Tracy Chapman,
I missed that one.
That was incredible. I mean, Fast Car is a masterpiece. It always has been. It's such just an incredible song. And she doesn't really perform a whole lot. She performed with Luke Combs. That was great. Billy Joel closed out the show. There were some really cool performances last night.
Yeah, I will miss that one because that's what reminded me to record it. Is somebody had sent me something to say, "Oh my God, that was great." I was like, "Crap, I forgot to record the Grammys." That's the one award show I actually do like. Not for the awards, I don't care about that, but for the actual performances. But whatever. So I'll go back and watch all of that. But yeah, it was a laid back weekend, and we like tried to tidy up the house and that kind of stuff. We did that. I played Super Mario with my kids for a while. Like it was nice. It was a nice way to just like chill. We had, we had basketball. The Teal Jaguars bounced back with a nice win this weekend. We had a 4-year-old doubleheader, which I got to tell you, doubleheaders don't need to happen for the 4-year-olds. You could poll 100 parents and say, would you like to play a doubleheader, or would you like to just cut out after the first one? And 100 parents would say, yeah, no, that's a terrible idea. But we did. We survived it. You bribe them with snacks and you make your way. But we make our way through. And now it's the week we've all been waiting for. It's the week to see if the Chiefs can finish this thing off. And we'll get into the Super Bowl as we make our way out. I want to start with the Shockers, Tommy. So the Shockers go to Memphis on Saturday. And again, do a lot of what we talked about last week. Give us both the ceiling and the floor all at one time. You've got it's a 14-point lead with about 7 minutes to go. I think I am, though, Tommy, as frustrating as all of this is. Like I'm trying to be realistic. And so and I didn't get to see the collapse because it was right when we went into the Teal Jaguars big showdown on Saturday out at the YMCA. But, I watched most of it right up until that point, honestly. And it always matters to win the games. It does. But the reality is it's not going to mean anything for Wichita State when we talk about where they end up this year. Like that, they're not all of a sudden going to be an at-large team. So I look at it, and the fact that they're in that position, I think, does encourage me in general, because the only thing that's like left out there for us outside of just watching basketball, which of course we do, but like for postseason, like is they're going to have to win their conference tournament. And man, they have been with, there's not a team in this league that they can't hang with. We know that now, right? Like we've seen that now. They've literally done it. They've done it twice against Memphis. Now the second half of the home game got away from them, but 2 times they've shown they can go blow for blow with Memphis. So I do think it's becoming, I guess, more optimistic just because the expectations are more clearly coming into focus for me, that, the ceiling is good enough. The floor is still infuriating at times, but it is what it is. And hopefully when we get to March, they can make some sort of magical run. I don't know. I almost had this shift of like, whatever. It doesn't really matter if they win these games anyway. And I know it does to them. I'm not talking about like reality. I'm talking about perception of trying to find something for this season. The reality is the Magic's going to come in the tournament no matter what we see. So I do think the fact that they're in these games is slightly encouraging for that point. It is, though, very frustrating to see them let another one slip away. But again, what does that even mean? Like for their prospects at the end of the year? Probably nothing.
Yeah, I feel like for Memphis in the second half of the game, they were just clutch, and Wichita State did a really good
Yep.
job early on in the game, mucking it up a little bit, making it not a very pretty game, and they go into halftime with a 6-point lead. And then, Memphis is able to find ways to get some players open to make the shots that really matter. David Jones shot the ball lights out in the game. He had 26 points. 16 of them came after halftime. He had the game-winning shot, and you kind of knew that Memphis was going to go to him to close out the game and to get back in it. And they did, and he was able to make those shots. Javon Quinterly kind of did the same thing, 23 points, 11 assists for him. He only missed 1 shot in the entire game. So Wichita State, I think, did a really good job, punching Memphis and absorbing the body blows throughout the first half and the first part of the second half. And then it's kind of, the same song, different verse. Memphis comes back. They finish on a 25-9 run to end the game. They didn't lead until the end of the game, basically. And David Jones hits the winning shot with 2 seconds to go. And that's basically the end of the road for Wichita State. So it's disappointing. It's frustrating, to have not only this game, but several other games that you feel like they're in hand and they're the shockers to lose. And that's exactly what happened on Saturday. It's happened multiple times.
Well, look, the reality is you imagine that game on a neutral court. And do you think the same thing happens? No, probably not. Wichita State is beginning to shoot the 3 a little bit better. And most of that, almost all of it came from Colby Rogers. So maybe that's not even fair. But the thing that stood out to me, Tommy, is they didn't turn the ball over.
Yeah.
Right.
Only
that's been
five
such
turnovers the entire game
to 10 assists. And that's not a ton of assists, but at least it's doubling up your turnovers. So, I mean, that's been such an Achilles heel for this team is turnovers. They didn't do that in this game. They played good defense. Remember the first game, and then remember that they allowed just 65 points at Memphis's place. Those are encouraging signs, even in a loss. Like there have been some losses where you scratch your head, shake your head, be like, "Bleh." That wasn't one of them. Even with the blown lead, I don't think, for a lot of the reasons you just pointed out. Memphis did a lot of great things late as I went back and looked at it, not in real time. But, you were out rebounded. That's probably going to happen against Memphis. But you didn't turn the ball over. You did a nice job forcing some turnovers. You didn't, get desperate at 3. And I think those are all things that can lead to shocker wins. And so For me, like my refocus, it's still going to be down the stretch here. Like they need to win the games they're supposed to win. Like that needs to happen. But it's also time to, I think, refocus and just imagine this team in a tournament setting. And how much, if they make a tournament run, let's say they win 2 or 3 tournament games, even if they don't win it all, it's going to leave a much, much better taste in everyone's mouth because most of these players can come back, right? Like they can. So them getting better down the stretch still matters. But, as you get games against UTSA, East Carolina again, Tulsa, Temple, UAB, Rice, Tulane, there are wins on this schedule and they need to get them very badly. But that also goes with just seeing them play well in games like that. I don't know what to make of. I mean, I ran the graphic on TV last week about how many late game situations they have not closed out. It is a lot. And this is another
the other
one.
thing. I think
this
the
is
other
the
thing
biggest one, too, by the way. It's just Memphis.
For sure. The other thing that's important to point out is that the Shockers only shot 35% from the field, and they led the majority of the game. They didn't shoot lights out, and they were able to lead the majority of the game, just about pull out a victory against a really good Memphis team. I know they've skidded over the last few weeks or so and kind of been in free fall, but still the talent that Memphis has is outstanding. And so if Wichita State is able to get away with a not great shooting day, I mean, really the only individual player that shot the ball well was Colby Rogers, 7 of 13 from the field. Other than that, it wasn't extremely pretty overall shooting from the field for Wichita State. If they can get away with that and still lead games and then be in games that they can win, even by shooting that percentage, it tells you that they're not turning the ball over. It tells you that, they're playing good defense. They're limiting what the opponent can do. Those are all things that we want to see keep up. And I've mentioned it before, and this is just, it's the fact of the matter. They've played really well in stretches, but they have a really hard time putting together a full 40 minutes of play. And, I mentioned before that Memphis was clutch, and that's true and all of that. But at the end of the day, I wonder how much of this is just a culture thing, where Wichita State, it's taking some time. And I'm not saying that the culture is bad. I'm just saying that this culture under Paul Mills is new, and these players don't exactly know how to close out games in the way that they should. It's not an excuse. They absolutely need to learn that. But I wonder how much of that will come along the longer that this program is together.
Well, what's funny, because there are teams that are all new with new coaches that are closing out games just fine. I think the culture part that matters in what's interesting about that game, for a long time, we have seen Wichita State thrive and not be pretty offensively, right? A long time we have seen that. That's almost what we saw there. And it will be interesting as we've, everybody has begged for faster paced offense, more offense, all of these things that a segment of fans have been begging for a really long time, in Isaac Brown and, in a lot of years under Greg Marshall. But the reality is this, like, uglying a game up, play angry, has always been what's made Wichita State successful. That's always what has made them great. That's almost what gave them by far their biggest win of the year on Saturday. That was not their pretty offensive game. That was one of their better games defensively. And so will they buy into that a little bit? And for whatever reason, and because it's always been different players, that's what's odd about that, is it's always been different players, but that identity through most years, I can think of one where that wasn't the identity, and that was the Austin Reeves, Landry Shamet, Connor Frankamp team that was getting up to around 80 points a game that, by the way, got bounced in the first round of the NCAA tournament. But, that's what, to me, has to stand through no matter what, right? That always has to be the identity, no matter who the coach is. And so it'll be curious to see if they feed on that a little bit now as they come into some of these games where, man, if you will just do that, if you'll take care of the ball and just make it miserable for the opposing offense, you're going to be in a position to do really great things. They've got opportunities down the way here. If scheduling was the excuse that you wanted to point to, then only a home game against Florida Atlantic looms as a game I would tell you that the Shockers shouldn't be able to win. That's it. And we've got 3, 6, 9 games left. Like the reality is 8-1 seems like something that, and now I'm not saying they're going to go 8-1. Don't misunderstand. But the Florida Atlantic game at home is the only
absolutely.
game you look at here and say, yeah, that one's probably too much. The rest of it, I mean, the rest of it is, it's gettable, right? It is gettable for them.
Yeah, and to your point, I can stomach a game against Memphis at Memphis where you lead the majority of the game and then lose on a last-second shot. I can stomach that. I don't like it. Obviously, you want to see them close out a game like that, but I can stomach it. I can't stomach losing at home to East Carolina. I can't stomach having a big lead against Tulsa and letting that slip away and losing that game. I'm not going to be able to stomach some of these other games down the stretch that are winnable games for Wichita State that they should be able to get the victory in. Those are games that, to your point, you have to win. You have to look good in them and you have to close them out. And so I think that and it's not even about making this season salvageable. It's not about that at this point, but it's about
instilling salvageable.
It's about instilling optimism and confidence in the program and the fan base moving forward. You know, those expectations that you are even before the season started, they're probably gone. They're at this point, you'd have to go 9-0 in your remaining 9 games to finish with a winning record in conference. And that's not going to happen, right? So those expectations are basically out the window. So at this point, you're looking forward. You're looking to the future. You're looking to having good building blocks and a good foundation to be able to build on in the future. And so that's why, I think that these winnable games that, you pointed out their schedule, they absolutely are, and you've got to take advantage of it.
You do, because if you have pointed to the schedule as an excuse, and I think it's a bad excuse because they've lost plenty of games they should have won. But if it is, this is your reset. Like everything about right now is your reset. I don't think there are any. I look, there are probably frustrated Shocker fans that they didn't pull it off against Memphis, but they're probably, if you're being honest with yourself, not a lot that wouldn't be slightly encouraged by the performance against Memphis. Only one game of the next 9, Tommy. Well, sorry. So let's slide Florida Atlantic to the side here. So of the remaining 8, only one of them is against a team inside the top 100 of the net rankings. It's Charlotte, and Charlotte's 95, right? So basically, outside of Florida Atlantic, everything you have left is against non-tournament teams, right? Against teams that aren't going to make the NCAA tournament. And so when you look at it that way, that's where you can, I think, see the 8-1 is gettable here. It really is. And so now we can reset. Like we have this great reset opportunity. Have a great finish. I would say, let's call it 7-2. Have a great finish. Get to the NCAA tournament and have us I could see them winning some tournament games. That'd be great.
And you know what? 8-1 gets you the remainder of the way, 500 in the conference.
Well, that would be remarkable,
right? That gets you right at 500. That gets you in the middle of the pack. And at that point, I think you can hang your hat on that and say, okay, year 1 of the Paul Mills era had some growing pains, had some struggles, lost games you should have won, but we've got something else that we can hang our hat on moving forward.
I can't explain it. It doesn't make sense. I can't believe it. But after a loss in which you blew a 14-point lead late in the second half, I feel better about it today than I did last Monday. Very strange dynamic, but it is what it is. We're optimists on this show. Fully will admit it. At least I am. I don't want to be miserable. That's no fun. I want to at least have something to look forward to. And I do look forward to the rest of this Shocker season. Of course, you'll hear all the Shocker games over on KEYN. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, where do we go? We've got Super Bowl talk. We've got KU and K-State talk. It's all coming for you. Sports Daily continues right after this. welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. It is Sunflower Showdown night, round one. Very different weekends for KU and K-State hoops. Look, if you're a K-State fan, tonight's your night, man. This is the way to bounce back. As a win tonight, they're only 4.5-point dogs to KU at home in Manhattan, which is interesting the way KU just played against Houston. KU picking a nice time to play its best game of the year against the Cougars, who, I think understandably and expectedly struggled. I mean, it was like to me, Tommy, bet the house situation on KU getting points at home for only the second time in the Bill Self era. That game screamed KU, with Houston coming in there the first time. All of the things. I think we saw the best of KU there. We still didn't see anything outside of the starting five, which is a little concerning. But if you get that out of your starting five, you're fine. I just think they need that's it. That's the remaining thing, like just a touch more from the bench. But man, when those and Brown was good when he was out there, but that was awesome for KU. That's what they needed. Furphy is a star developing. If you hoped he's. Let me put it this way, Tommy. I'll be surprised if he comes back next year, because I think in sort of like Grady Dick last year, NBA teams are going to like him enough to try to maybe make him a lottery pick. But he has been the missing puzzle piece, at least for the starting five, and they've looked good with him in there and looked their best, I thought, against Houston.
Well, I would argue he's playing better than Grady Dick played at this time a year ago, and Grady Dick was good. Grady Dick played great in non-conference, and if you go back and you look, he kind of got quiet during conference play, during Big 12 play a year ago. And I think, you get into conference play and bigger opponents and that sort of thing. That sort of thing happens. I'm not saying that Grady Dick didn't play well.
I think
Furphy's playing better.
I do think
in
the
Big 12
circumstances were different. I think Furphy is being asked to do more and allowed to do more than Dick was. Dick became such a needed shooter for them that it almost like pigeonholed him, I thought, as a, like, if I don't know that he got the opportunity to cut it loose in the same way that Furphy has now, because they have to have it from Furphy. They didn't have to have it from Grady Dick last year. They needed him to do exactly what he did.
The expectations
and they need
are
so
different.
much more.
Grady Dick was this really highly touted incoming freshman, potential NBA guy, and we know what happened with that, and he's in the NBA now, and it's great. But Johnny Furphy, not a lot of people had heard of him. He reclassified. I heard he only had one Division I offer, and that was, I think, Sacramento State was the only other team that had given him an offer, and then KU found him, reclassified to join them right away, and here he is bursting onto the scene. I absolutely is an NBA type guy.
Oh, he's an NBA type guy. I wonder how long he'll stick around, for sure. And it's just, we'll see, but he has been their missing puzzle piece, and he has been the spark that they have needed, clearly. Now they've got to follow that up and take it on the road, which has not been an amazing place for them this year. Certainly, they're 2-3 away from home this year, so let's see them follow it up tonight. You know what I mean? Like that. That's great that you beat Houston at home. You don't play tournament games at home, right? You got to be better than 2-3 on the road. And that's why you sent me a message, and we can get into this here. You sent me a message about Ken Pom and how Houston has stayed at the top and all of these things. KU hasn't been good enough on the road, and they haven't been good enough against bad teams, unfortunately. It's irrelevant. The net is also lagging in the exact same way. Like, still right now, you've got Houston, BYU is hanging in there in both the net and Ken Pom. Then you have KU right behind them. They're 10 in the net. They're 12 in Ken Pom. They've got plenty of opportunities down the stretch here to climb back up. Remember, for a long time, too, Kansas was at the top there, but they just kept falling flat a little bit, especially on the road, and it's hurt them by the computers, and they'll just, they'll have an opportunity to make that up. But, at the top of the Ken Pom right now are Houston, Purdue, and Connecticut. I think that's fair based on what we've seen. And KU will have a chance to climb back up. But they got to be better on the road. They have to be better on the road.
I mean, they played great against top-tier opponents. And, I know that we talked earlier in the season and in the non-conference that they weren't covering against teams that they, should be covering against and all of that. I do think, and this is the way that it always happens, it's February 5th. The team right now is different than the team was on December 5th. And it's going to
Totally.
be different on March 5th. And it might even be different at the very beginning of April if the Jayhawks
Yeah.
can make it that far.
In a good way.
In a good way, for sure. I mean, I think that with the emergence of Johnny Furphy, that has absolutely filled a spot in the starting five that they desperately needed another option. They needed more production out of that fifth spot. And I think Furphy's emergence in conference play has been incredibly important for what the Jayhawks are looking to do in the postseason. You made a point about the bench. I get it. You want Marco Jackson and Nick Timberlake and Jamari McDowell and Parker Brown. You want those guys to produce more. At least one of them. You need somebody to do something. I get it. But they beat the number 4 ranked team in America with basically just the starting five. Now, I know it was at home, and you get into, tournament play when you're playing back-to-back games and all of that, and it becomes a grind. I get that. You'd like to have, better bench production so you can rest some of your starters a little bit more down the stretch. I'm not sure that's realistic for this team, but I do think they can get it done with basically their starting five, and if they can get one other player to produce.
Yeah, they need one, but the problem, because they do have versatility in that starting five also. So, most of the time you need like a guard and a forward. I don't think that's what they just need one of them because they can rotate everybody else around. Like Dwan Harris isn't going to catch himself in foul trouble, right? So know your point guard's fine, but anybody else can catch themselves in foul trouble. So it's not that I don't have confidence in the starting five. Run your starting five if you can every game. That's fine. But it only, let alone injury, it only takes foul trouble, right, to create an issue. And that's where it's like, okay, they have got to have somebody else to be able to just spell them. I'm not so sure it's not going to be Brown, man. Like he's doing fine, Parker Brown, when he comes in there. I don't think he looks overmatched at all. I think he's risen his game to this level. And so we'll see who it is. It'd be really nice if it was two of them. I don't know that that's realistic. I think it has to be one of them. But the bigger challenge right now is finding your fifth starter. And it's clearly Furphy. And it does give them the best starting five in the country. I firmly believe that. Now, there are other teams with more depth, and we'll see what plays through. But I think if you, and that's what we expected to begin the year too, right? It was like, okay, we think KU is going to have the best starting five in the country. Now, at the time, you thought that was going to be Arterio Morris. That kind of blew up in their face a little bit, and so we've moved on. I think now they've found it, and I don't think there's anybody that would disagree with that, but you still have to be able to maintain that, and through that is just a little bit of depth. We know historically that Bill Self is just fine running 6 guys, 7 guys maybe. Like he's done it forever. But you got to have somebody that you can count on to step in and at least just give you the minutes you need, right? Like it doesn't have to be a high impact offensive player. It doesn't have to be anything like that. Like who's going to come in and defend at a high level and who's going to come in and not be overmatched on the court. That's why I wonder if Brown isn't the guy that ends up being that, because the other guys have more upside. He's got the highest floor to me of the group right now, the 2 freshmen plus Timberlake at this point through this. And that's pretty remarkable to think about.
The other guys have more upside, but they're also not executing, right?
Yeah.
They're not executing. Marco Jackson in 9 minutes had 2 points and 3 turnovers. That's not going to get it done in conference play. You can't, you're going to find yourself on the bench permanently when you're playing for Bill Self if you've got 3 turnovers in 9 minutes and only 2 points. Nick Timberlake, we're a broken record. He's not making his shots. If you look at the bench production during the game with Houston, the Jayhawks would have shot over 70% from the field if nobody from the bench had taken a shot. If you take away the bench production, the starting five would have shot the ball over 70% from the field. The bench, 25%. So there's a clear drop off when you go away from any of those 5 starters for Kansas. And that's why you see the minutes, 33 minutes, 35, 36, 37 for the starters. They're playing the lion's share of the minutes. And I get it. It's a top tier opponent. Bill Self gets his rotations really, really tight, but I get what you're saying. From your point, you get into foul trouble. What are you going to do? Johnny Furphy had 4 fouls in the game. What happens if those 4 fouls come earlier and you've got to lean on somebody? So I understand the concerns, but if you can prevent that sort of thing from happening as much as possible, then absolutely Bill Self is going to keep
But that's
leaning
gas on the
that
fire.
starting
You
five.
can't control when you get a tight whistle in a game. Like, you can't
Yeah.
control that. And you can't control, like, let's say they play, I don't know, Purdue in a meaningful game late. You don't think you think you're going to be okay without a handful of fouls to fool around with trying to guard Edey? You know what I mean? Like, you got to have that in your back pocket. No, like, if they don't have foul trouble, you can have the starting five play every minute of every game as far as I care. Like, I just need to know that if called upon, somebody can come in there. And that's honestly why I'm starting to come around to the idea of Brown being that guy. Because when he comes in, yeah, you're not going to be as explosive, but he's also probably not coming in and making a bunch of mistakes either, right? Like, if you need him to come in because you need him to come in and just steady the waters while you have to get some minutes in, if somebody, like, he's the guy right now to me that I trust the most out of that group. And, ideally, one of these freshmen step up and does it. I don't think it's going to be Timberlake, because I think Furphy just flat took his job and is better at everything. So I don't think it's going to be Timberlake. It's probably going to be Brown or one of the two freshmen. And I think that's still, I think it already is. I think I trust Brown already, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So your emergency plan, he seems like he's going to be okay. Now let's see if one of these freshmen can actually come into a game and give you something, right? And we'll see. They got to go on the road tonight. Like, none of that's as important as just playing well on the road. And it's going to be hostile in Manhattan, as you've got a desperate K-State team. Let's take a quick break. We'll have more on the Jayhawks coming up with Sri Aslata at the top. Let's come back and talk the Wildcats. Spiraling right now, what feels like out of control, with their biggest opportunity of the season coming tonight in that Sunflower Showdown game. We'll touch on that as we return on Sports Data.
KFH.
All right, welcome back in, everybody. K-State reeling right now. The Cats in big trouble. They are falling farther and farther behind. 4 games losing in a row. I don't know how much the Oklahoma State loss hurts their chances at the NCAA tournament. I know winning that game would not have helped their chances at the NCAA tournament, so I'm not sure. What I do know is the wins will matter more than the losses, and so you just throw that in the trash can and you come back tonight with a tremendous opportunity at home against KU. Look, I don't know what's going on, Tommy, with K-State. I don't know if reality is just sort of setting in a little bit for them. It was an interesting game on Saturday. You saw a different looking starting 5, Colbert, Dede Ames, both in there. Tyler Perry actually shot the ball well from 3. Cam Carter shot the ball well. So you had those 2 guards playing well together collectively, but you lose to Oklahoma State. I don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't know what they can do to help fix any of this. I don't know if it's even fixable or if, again, it's just reality for this team. I'm not sure what to make it.
Well, you have to remember that Oklahoma State is really desperate in the same way that Kansas State is. I mean, Oklahoma State is trying to pull themselves and climb out of a hole right now that, it hasn't been good for them this season. And they played the Wildcats really close and really tight in Manhattan a few weeks ago. And they go back down to Stillwater and they're able to pull out the win. I feel like this is absolutely a Kansas State team that's coming back down to earth a little bit. They're trying to find their way. It's been a frustrating stretch of basketball, to say the least, for Kansas State. Jerome Tang, we've seen different emotions from him than I think we've seen ever in his time at Kansas State. There was a timeout where he just unleashed on his team on the sidelines. We haven't really seen that to that extent from Jerome Tang in his tenure at Kansas State up to this point. So there's been definitely frustration building, frustration mounting. This is a team that needs to, right the ship a little bit, and they've got that opportunity inside Bramlage tonight in the Sunflower Showdown. The one thing that we know about Kansas State, it doesn't matter who the coach is, it doesn't matter how good or bad their program is. When KU comes to town,
right? Yeah,
that team gets up for it. That's the way that it's always been and the way it always will be. So this is good timing for this game because you can absolutely turn around the fortunes of your program with a good showing tonight.
It's pretty interesting, the opportunity awaiting both of these teams tonight. It's very different. There have certainly been years where last year, good example, right? Because of the implications of the game. But it is a massive opportunity for both of these teams tonight to do something they they really need to do, right? Like, we know K-State's not winning the Big 12 this year. They're probably not making the NCAA tournament. It would take a Herculean effort down the stretch here for that to happen. So what's out there now? Well, if that's going to happen, K-State almost has to win this game. And for KU, they desperately need to get wins like I mean, you can't have this loss if you're KU, right? Again, this isn't a game that's going to help their tournament resume. But, if KU wants to play in Omaha and have the path it wants to have, it needs to come into these points. It needs to win the Big 12. It's got, which is now back within reach, certainly, as you've got 5 teams with 3 losses, 7 teams with 4 or fewer losses, and 12 teams with 5 or fewer losses, Tommy. It's just absolutely absurd what's still out there in the Big 12. But, there are 10 teams right now that could absolutely get into the NCAA tournament. You have 10 teams, Tommy, basically inside the top 40 of the net out of the Big 12. That's probably going to be a ticket in. I think we'll very likely see 10 Big 12 teams in the NCAA tournament this year. Can Kansas State do enough down the stretch to, jump over a couple of them? I don't know. They'd almost have to win them all. It starts with tonight, right? That's where it starts. Don't you think K-State would have liked to have Naquan Tomlin's 10 and 6 and 2 blocks that he had against Wichita State? I mean, we have to remember the hand that has been dealt this team this year, I think, and be realistic in it. Without Naquan Tomlin, if we went back to the beginning of the year and said, hey, K-State's not going to have them, are they going to be a tournament team? I think most of us would have said no, right? No, I don't think so. And so that's where they are. So you just refocus it. And this is one of the big ones to get up for. They're good enough to win big games. Absolutely. Down the stretch. We've seen that this year.
They beat a top 10 Baylor team at home a couple of weeks ago with the exact same lineup and roster that they currently have. So they can do it. They have done it. They can do it again. And that's why, again, like I mentioned, it doesn't matter. You can have Kansas at the top of the rankings and K-State all the way down at the bottom. You can throw that out the window when you play inside Bramlage for the Sunflower Showdown. That never matters. And so, again, that's why I think that the timing of this for Jerome Tang is really good, because you're looking for a spark to turn things around for this team. And this is a good moment for that, because, again, it doesn't matter the standings or anything like that. All that matters is that you've got your hated rival coming into town. You know that Bramlage is going to be packed and amped and ready to go for this game. This is as good of a time as any to turn around the team. And I think that if they're able to get that done tonight against the Jayhawks, you'll look back on this particular game in March and say, this is the game that started to stem the tide for the Wildcats and get things turned around for them.
On the most polar opposite end, it's also the game where things could spiral out of control, right? If KU dominates tonight, that could be a tipping point in the wrong direction for K-State too. That's what you have to be careful of. Real quick, Tommy, because we'll switch to the Super Bowl in the second hour after we talk to Shreyas Laddha in our next segment. K-State's getting 4.5 at home. What side of that do you lean on? I have to lean on KU as much as they've disappointed on the road. At this point, with the trajectories pointed in the way that they are, I think I got to point to KU and give up the 4.5, even in Manhattan tonight.
I don't know. I mean, I think that if you're going to give the Wildcats points at home, I mean, it feels like a trap to me. It feels like a KU trap.
Sure does.
I'm staying away from that.
Sure does. All right, the diplomatic answer from Castor. We'll come back. Shreyas Laddha joins us next to get his take on KU right now, and I wonder if he feels the same way I do about Parker Brown. We'll ask him that and everything else about KU. Maybe a little football talk when we return on Sports Daily.
NFL Loud Mornings with Bob and Tom on 97.5 and 1240 KFH. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
It's that time, Sports Daily, getting all the inside information on the Kansas Jayhawks. Let's go now to the KU football and basketball beat writer from the Kansas City Star, Shreyas Laddha.
All right, and welcome back in, everybody, to Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. We are joined by Shreyas Laddha. Glad to have you in again this week, Shreyas, coming off of, I would say, the best performance by KU all year and an opportunity tonight to shake some of those road woes that have plagued them this year. How are you this morning?
Good. How are you guys?
We're doing good. I want to ask you this question. We were just talking about this a little bit in the last hour as we look at a clear starting five now. Johnny Furphy has taken that. But of the bench players, I think I trust Parker Brown the most for what KU's ultimately going to need off the bench. Am I crazy for that?
No, I don't think so. I think he plays his role very well. I think he's pretty consistent with it, and you don't really need him to do too much or reinvent the wheel. He gives Hunter some rest when he needs it, and for the most part, I think you're pretty happy with him on the court.
Let's talk about the starting five a little bit, Sharius. We know that, Bill Self is going to lean on these five players, and that's the way that it's going to be moving forward in conference play in the postseason and all of that. Is there concern at all in your mind about what happens if one of these players gets into foul trouble, or, if you have to go away from that starting five because the production drops off pretty significantly for that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's concern there in the sense of, they don't have a lot of depth, and the bench scoring and all that is a little bit of an issue. Quite a big issue. But I think, Bill said it best, is in conference play, it's an issue, but as the games, as we get towards Big 12 tournament time in March, I think the bench scoring issue will be minimalized a little bit because, you can play guys more minutes. There's more time at halftime. There's more time in between games. But I definitely do think it's something to keep an eye on in conference play because of the, lack of depth and, if an injury occurs or something like that. But, we saw a guy like Marco Jackson step up, when Kevin McCullough was out. So, maybe a guy or two can step up if an injury does occur. We don't know. I wouldn't say definitively no or yes, either way.
When we look at the metrics for KU, they are still behind both BYU and Houston in the Big 12 as far as KenPom and net. What is it metrically right now that is holding KU, relatively speaking, back a little bit? And what do they need to improve on for those things to like them a little bit more?
Probably the fact that they have lost to UCF and West Virginia and Iowa State on the road. They have one road win in the conference so far against OSU, which is like a bottom tier conference team. They need to win on the road. I think it starts today. They need to win against Kansas State, a reeling team that's lost 4 straight and is desperate for a win. I think Kansas also just needs to continue to play more consistent defense, like they played against Houston, more consistent offense. I think there's ways to improve the consistency in both ends. Will make Mech like them more. But I think the most important thing is they got to win conference games on the road.
Let's talk a little bit about the emergence of Johnny Furphy in that 5th spot, Sharius. 6 of 7 from the field against Houston, 3 of 4 from 3, 17 points, 8 rebounds. I mean, the guy has exploded onto the scene in conference play. And I know it's extremely important because we've seen that 5th spot not be great for Kansas before Johnny came around and kind of filled that role. But knowing what he's been able to do, the way that he shoots the ball from 3, the way that he's just super aggressive, what does that mean, do you think, for the way that Bill Self wants to play the games and the strategy that he's got moving forward, knowing that Johnny Furphy is doing a great job?
Well, it's raised the team ceiling tremendously. I'm a lot higher in Kansas than I was 2 weeks ago. I think, I feel confident that they can make a little bit of a run, maybe this conference play, and maybe get the conference title, or, when tournament time comes around, that maybe they can win 6 straight. I think he's really fit seamlessly in the starting lineup. He's clearly a guy that doesn't need a lot of touches. His usage rate is 4th in the starting lineup, but he's the best individual offensive rating out of anybody on the starting lineup, and he's number 30 overall in the entire nation in offensive rating. And I said it last week, he's a guy that is so good with the ball in his hands that I can't wait to watch him play in the NBA, because he's an even better NBA player, I think, than he's a college basketball player. He doesn't need the ball a lot to make an impact. He's a winning basketball player. And, I've been a little bit, I think, ahead of the trade on this, but if he keeps up the way he's playing, there's no doubt in my mind he's going to be a lottery pick come, July.
Is it the missing piece, though? Like, I think it gives them the best starting 5 in the country. Is it the missing piece to put them back where we had them at the beginning of the season? Does that raise the ceiling to that level of being the best team in the country?
I don't know. I think there are, I would say there are teams that I think I feel a little more confident in. Like I would say I would say UConn is a better team than Kansas is at this moment in time. Obviously, Kansas beat UConn at home, but I'd like to see Kansas do it on neutral ground or at UConn. But I do think that makes them a top 5 team in the country. I think Johnny Murphy has made this team. He solved a lot of the issues that this team has. The 5th starter issue was a huge one, as Evan Mia pointed out a couple of weeks ago. That Elmarco Jackson was like the 64th best, 5th starter, I think, in the country. I think Johnny's like a top 25 5th starter in the country, which is pretty big. But also, he's getting better day in, day out. He was better defensively last game than he was in previous games. Offense to him comes pretty easily. I got a text midway through the game from a friend of mine. He does draft evaluations for ESPN and stuff like that. And he just texted me and he was like, he's an NBA player. And I agree. I think he is so good out there on the court in limited, scope. He doesn't need the ball a lot to do some damage. And it seems like he's getting more and more comfortable day in, day out. And I think he could be the piece for Kansas to try and make a run in the conference and also after that.
On the flip side, Sharius, what did you take away from Houston? It's a team that we know what they do defensively. They've done it all season long, but Kansas kind of found the way around that. Fast paced. They made their shots early. All of those different things to kind of give Houston a gut punch. What did you take away from Kelvin Sampson's crew?
Well, I think they got to see the advantage of Allen Fieldhouse and the fans and how difficult it is to win, even if you're a favored, one of the few favored teams ever in the Bill Self era. It was just the second time ever Kansas was home underdogs under Bill Self, right? I think they just were not ready. And to be honest with you, for a team that allowed 70% from the floor shooting, basically, the fact that they only lost by 13 is a miracle in itself. Kansas out rebounded them a ton because they couldn't miss shots. It was one of those games that I think it was like a welcome to the Big 12 moment. And it's a reminder that until seen otherwise, the conference runs to the Kansas Jayhawks. They're the defending Big 12 champion, and I think a lot of people were getting ahead and saying they couldn't do it. But I think this conference with Murphy's emergence has become completely wide open, if not leaning towards the Jayhawks. But the big test for Kansas is, can they win on the road on the conference? And I think, I'm really curious to see how Kansas looks at Houston in about a month from now, because I think that's going to be the big test for both sides. And I know the Cougars will be more ready to play than they were on Saturday, because they look completely shell-shocked as, they played Kansas throughout the game.
How do you avoid, if you're Kansas? They seem equipped to where going into it's what's so weird about the road. I never would have pictured this as a team that struggled on the road. When you look at the experience of 80% of that starting lineup all year, this does feel like a pretty good opportunity for them to flush that a little bit tonight, and be what they should be on the road. Right? This isn't a team that should be struggling on the road with all the minutes 4 of their 5 starters have played over their careers.
Yeah, I think they're going to go out there and win. I just don't see them, if this team is as good as everyone thinks it is, as good as they think they are, and as they've shown they can be, they're going to go out and beat a rival that's lost 4 straight, no matter how desperate they are. Just put it bluntly, I don't think Kansas State is a very good basketball team, and Jerome Tang was playing coaching out of his mind earlier in the year, to make up for that lack of talent that they had compared to what they had last year. And if you look at the metrics for Kansas State, they're not a good offensive team. They're a pretty good defensive team, but they don't have the offensive firepower to keep up with Kansas. So, Kansas should win this game, even if, it's in Manhattan, even if it's a rough environment. It's one of those games that Kansas should realize, and I'm sure they know, how important it is, not just for the standings, but important to keep the momentum going. Because now you won 2 straight. You win today, that's 3 straight. You play Baylor on Saturday, maybe that's 4 straight. That's at home. And then you have to go on the road a little bit the next couple of weeks. But, I think it's, this team has found something. And, I think the Saturday game made them realize how good, when they can be when they're all locked in and playing up to their competition and not down.
So we know obviously, Shreas, the atmosphere tonight is going to be crazy inside Bramlage. It always is. But from a game strategy perspective, what are things that you know about Kansas State that the Jayhawks will need to be concerned about? I mean, obviously, they've got talent. They've got a good shooter in Tyler Perry when he can shoot. Cam Carter has done a pretty good job this season. Arthur Kaluma has come up pretty well. So what are some things that you think the Jayhawks should be on the lookout for in this game if they want to avoid the upset?
Yeah, I think the big thing is take care of the ball because you don't want to give unnecessary possessions away and give more opportunities for Kansas State to, get some buckets. On top of that, Tyler Perry, he's shooting 32% for the year, but 75% of his shots are 3-pointers. So Kansas has to know if he has the ball in transition, he's probably going to pull up. So they need to make sure they mark him, keep an eye on him, run him off the 3-point line when they can. Because, 32% isn't amazing, but as we've seen, and as you said, he can shoot, and he has shot well in certain games, and other games he hasn't been great. But if you can contain him and Kaluma, I think Kansas should roll out there as a victor. But the big thing is, I think, limit turnovers, continue to play through Dickinson, McCullough, Furphy on offense. And, Kansas had 18 turnovers against Houston. It felt like it was either a shot or a turnover. You can't have 18 turnovers, I think, in another game like this. I think it's important to remember that because Kansas is probably not going to shoot 70% from the floor again.
Yeah, they're not. And that's okay. They don't have to. That's not going to be something you can count on throughout the tournament. All right, so what do you stylistically looking for? What is a key to the game for KU? And then Shreas, what would be the key, I guess, for K-State on the flip side? What would happen for K-State to be able to get the win here too?
Yeah, for Kansas, the big thing is don't get too caught up in the crowd and the fact that don't fall. Don't come in thinking you're going to win just because K-State's lost 4 straight. I think these things are super important. I think that stylistically they need to play with urgency. They need to get out to a big start. They need to quiet the home crowd. They need to play, through Hunter Dickinson, the big men. They've done really well job of that this year. They need to make sure Kevin and Furphy continue to have good games. And on the flip side, I think K-State needs to contain Hunter, needs to force Kansas into making unnecessary turnovers. You need to get out to a little bit of a lead to, get your crowd into it even more than they already are. You want everything to put pressure on Kansas. You want to make 3-pointers at a good rate because Kansas, outside of Furphy, there's no guy that I would sit there and say he's a shooter that you can consistently count on to make a lot of 3-pointers. So if you go out to a big lead if you're Kansas State and you're making 3-pointers at a good clip, that's your best chance, I think, of winning this basketball game.
All right, Shreas Latta, you can find his work at the KC Star, football and basketball beat writer there. You can follow him on social media. Shreas, enjoy the game tonight. We'll talk to you again next week.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, there goes Shreas Latta. When we return, we will get into the Super Bowl talk. On the way out, let's give away some HTO. I will give you a free iced tea, a free Brewhouse coffee, one of each, to the first caller to the IHOP hotline right now, 869-1240. While you're in there, you can try the new energy shots. Good luck, everybody. Jad will get us an HTO winner. We'll be back with our beginning of Super Bowl week talk next on Sports Daily.
Want to hear this? Sports Daily is on KFH.
Sunflower Showdown tonight. You can hear it right here on 97.5 and 1240 KFH and for free on the Odyssey app. Wildcat basketball at 8 o'clock on KFH. After Shocker Coaches shows, you get the Terry Nooner show at 6, followed by the Paul Mills show at 7 right here on KFH. You can simply download the Odyssey app, search KFH, and get all of that. Congratulations to Doug for winning our HTO giveaway today, iced tea and brew house coffee. The iced tea at all 3 locations around the area here, both Wichita locations and in Derby, the brew house just at the East Wichita location and in Derby. Welcome back in, everybody. It is Super Bowl week. Travis Kelce was not at the Grammys last night. He was getting ready for a Super Bowl, and it's in Vegas, and they've got the Sphere lit up, and it would be a hard place to be for a week, to be totally separate. And I think they're like away from the Strip, right? You got to get it. Like, it would be hard. It would be hard to focus there, but we'll see. I think that part is maybe advantage Chiefs, as you're looking at little bits and pieces of what I still like. Nothing has changed over the weekend for me. I think that the Chiefs have got some key injuries to try to work through here. The line is sticking around 2 points for the 49ers. I'm curious to see where most of the money goes. I think probably for me, it's going to get into a situation of I'm not betting against Mahomes. And look, Mahomes has lost a Super Bowl to Tom Brady, right? Brock Purdy's got a lot to prove in this game. He'll have a tremendous opportunity to do that. But as we make our way through, I cannot shake Mahomes and Kelsey and this defense being in the position that they've been in to get to all year, and now here it is. I think that's where I'm going to end up leaning here.
Well, that's where the intangibles kind of tell you just the history of all of this and the experience that Mahomes and Kelsey have on this stage, and they've been here before. Yeah, you said it at the beginning of the show, 4th time in 5 years. From a talent perspective on the offense, if you're just comparing offenses, I think San Francisco has a better offense. Doesn't mean that they're going to play better in the Super Bowl, but I think Christian McCaffrey obviously is the best all-around skill player in the NFL, and we know that. They've got dynamic wide receivers and Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. What George Kittle can do, I mean, he's second only to Travis Kelce. Now, the emergence of Rashee Rice for Kansas City, that elevates where Kansas City's offense is right now. The fact that it looks like they're going to be getting Jerick McKinnon back, I think that helps for sure also. Yeah. But if you're just comparing like apples to apples from a talent perspective, offensively, I think San Francisco is better, but it doesn't mean they're going to play better on this big stage.
No, and defensively, Kansas City's better.
Kansas City is better.
Like,
yeah.
Right. Even without a Minihue, I think they're better. And so it's, if the game is close, that's where you really lean into the Chiefs, right? But let's remember the last time Kyle Shanahan faced the Chiefs in a Super Bowl. The Chiefs I remember being at that game in Miami and thinking, it's been really bad timing for the Chiefs to pick one of their worst games to play. And Mahomes didn't play well early in that game either. Now, that was an eternity ago in the NFL, right? Most of these players are not the same. The quarterback for San Francisco is not the same. But some of the defensive players are the same. Not a ton. And so I just, I don't know what to make of all of that. This is a tremendous opportunity for San Francisco. We talk about pressure, right? Kyle Shanahan faces the most. Christian McCaffrey's finally in this spot. George Kittle, had some very famous things to say at the last one. San Francisco's got a lot sitting there for them too. And remember how impressive they looked after halftime against the Lions. This is a really hard one. Hard enough that probably I'll do something that I never do, Tommy. I have a preseason bet of the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. I may hedge that a little bit, because I do think it's that close. And I don't, so let me give you an example. Against the Dolphins, I was like Chiefs for sure. Against the Ravens, Chiefs for sure. I mean, all over it. Like, no doubt in my mind. This isn't the same thing for me. Like, I don't feel that way this time. It's not Chiefs for sure. It's pretty much just become Mahomes and Kelsey for sure, right? Like that, but it's not one of these things where I just cannot imagine, and we've said this and we'll keep saying it, that Christian McCaffrey doesn't touch the ball 25 to 30 times in this game. San Francisco will not make the same mistake Baltimore made. They won't. And the Chiefs defense, as great as it is, and it is great, it is not great against the run. And so if you're San Francisco, you do a couple of things. No matter what, you want the ball first. The Chiefs will probably defer. If you're San Francisco and you win the toss, you take the ball. Because if you can march down and get a touchdown, it changes the dynamic of the game completely. take the ball first if you're San Francisco, no matter what happens. The Chiefs would defer because they almost always do. If I were the Chiefs, I'd take the ball first, but I don't think they will. So like there are so many little things, but if San Francisco can make this game play to the way they can get McCaffrey that many touches, I think the Chiefs are in really big trouble. And so I don't know what that means. I think the Chiefs still have to try to run the ball and play not conservatively offensively, but the formula, the plan we've been talking about. All of those things, when you stop and think about it, favor the 49ers, Tom. I mean, they do. Like if you slow it down and you grind it out and you do all, that's exactly what San Francisco wants to do. So is Kansas City, but that's also what Baltimore you'd think would have wanted to do, and they didn't. So I don't know. I'll never understand why Baltimore did that. I think that was more about Baltimore and less about the Chiefs, but I don't think San Francisco is making that same mistake.
Yeah, if I'm San Francisco, I'm giving the ball to Christian McCaffrey 25 times, maybe more. I'm going to set up plays. I'm going to set up plays to run Deebo Samuel out of the backfield, some jet sweeps and other things like that, he can use his speed on the edge, to get out and around. Those are a couple different things that I would want to do offensively in the game. And it honestly, if I'm the 49ers, I don't care if I'm up 10 or down 10. Those are things that I'm going to want to do. You have to do regardless of the way the game is playing out. I mean, the last thing that you want to have happen is, Brock Purdy to throw the ball 45 times or whatever. I think that if you can utilize McCaffrey in that way, if you can utilize Deebo in that way, and then you can get Purdy himself to scramble for some extra yardage and first downs and that sort of thing. I mean, that's a scenario that I think will work out really well for San Francisco.
It's a strange dynamic, and I didn't know Purdy had that in the tank until we saw the Lions game. I'm like, whoa, he's kind of fast. My brain is telling me to pick San Francisco in this game. They're healthy, which has been a big thing for them, right? If they weren't healthy, it would be different, but they are. And the other thing about McCaffrey is even if you are down, getting him touches comes in any scenario of a game, right? He's a pass catcher. He's all these things. So I don't even think that game script impacts his touch load that much, because being down 10 with Christian McCaffrey and being down 10 with Gus Edwards are two very different things. My brain is telling me that this favors the Niners. It is, right? Which is why the Vegas is and everything else. But then you get into like sort of that gut feel on things, and my gut says you can't go against Mahomes and Kelsey in that defense the same way my gut has been trying to tell my brain to shut up all year, right? Like, nope, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. With that kind of a defense, they're going to do anything they need to do. Man, Minihew's injury is big. It's looming for me. Like, there are a lot of things where I am having a very difficult time. I'm picking the Chiefs. I'm going with my gut because my gut has been right on them all year. But my brain is telling me this is a bad matchup and the 49ers would be the pick. It's a strange internal dynamic that existed in the regular season. It hasn't existed for me in the postseason. My brain told me to pick the Chiefs in the postseason game so far up until this point, but now it's different and I can't shake it. So I'm just going to ride my gut on this. I mean, I'm just going to ride my gut the way I have all year. But it's uneasy. I cannot wait for this game. The other thing, too, I think, Tommy, most people are in absolute agreement on this, at least anybody I've ever heard. Like, I think everybody expects an epic game. Like, I think everybody expects this to be an incredible, fun, exciting game to watch, chess match kind of a thing.
I think so, too. I mean, I think that both teams are in a position where, while I don't think that we're going to be seeing like a really high scoring game, I think that we could easily see, gosh, I don't know, a 20-17 type final or something like that. I mean, I don't exactly know. Have you looked at where the over under is right now for the game? I think it was at like 43 the last I saw it. I don't know if that's changed or not. But if it's around there, I'm looking at the under, because I think the way that Kansas City has played throughout the season, the under is kind of definitely in play. And with the 49ers as well, what they bring defensively, and if they want to control the tempo, control the game on the ground, I mean, I think that we're looking at a close game, but I think the under is probably in play.
Yeah, it is. I would lean on it, but there's so many explosive players on the field.
47.5 is where it stands right now. I'm
I
definitely looking at the under. Definitely
think
the
it's
under
the
right
right
now.
line. I like the under for sure, but I could also I won't be surprised if 2 or 3 explosive plays from some of the most explosive players in football happen, right? And it just kind of blows your over. You could be right about the under in that and lose the bet. You know what I mean? Like you get a couple of broken, busted type plays, and there's like 14 points scored that way. It's going to make that a little more difficult. We'll see. The Chiefs. It's what's so funny about that is the Chiefs don't really have the explosive element, right? Like it's not in their DNA. So I don't know who that would be on their end. Maybe a deep shot to MVS or gosh, I don't know. Jerick McKinnon doing some magic after he catches the ball. But, Kelsey and Rashee Rice probably aren't doing that. That's not what they are right now. So I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be back and forth. I think the hardest thing to imagine is a blowout, which happens sometimes in the Super Bowl. It's hard for me to imagine Mahomes ever being blown out in any game. It's hard for me to imagine San Francisco with all the weapons that they have not being able to hang in there. I don't know what I suppose the path to a blowout are some Brock Purdy turnovers, which is, look, if they pass the ball, if it's Brock Purdy versus one of the best secondaries in football, that's a little daunting. Again, I said it and I'm sticking to it. I think McCaffrey will have more touches than Purdy has pass attempts. I just like, if that has got to be the plan for San Francisco. Like, you have got to just simplify this and make the Chiefs stop you running the ball. You have to. And that might take 3 quarters to really make them do it. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a 1 drive, 2 drives. It's like a 3-quarter commitment. And their defense is going to have to step up for that to be allowed. But I think their defense is good enough to not let Kansas City light them up by any means. So, because Kansas City wants to run the ball too. Like, let's not kid ourselves. Like, they'd love to run the ball.
That's probably why the under is, I think, in play. I mean, it's worked well when they lean on Isaiah Pacheco for good reason, as we all know that. So I think that if they can lean on him now, if you're going to get into a battle between Christian McCaffrey and Isaiah Pacheco, McCaffrey's the best back in the NFL. Yeah, I mean, so I'm not sure you really want to play that game.
They're so different though in what they do, right? Like, they play the same position, but like Isaiah Pacheco, you could compare to some of the Ravens guys. McCaffrey's, he's not a unicorn, but he's the best at what, I don't know, like Jerick McKinnon could be, right? He's the best versatile back, but I mean, Pacheco's sort of he's just a bull in a china closet. He's putting his head down. He looks for contact. I don't think that's McCaffrey. So I don't know. Like, I think McCaffrey gets utilized no matter what's happening in the game. Pacheco could get taken out of the game by San Francisco. I think you could eliminate him from the game plan. You're not eliminating Christian McCaffrey from the game plan.
No, I mean, like, you can try to limit him, and you can try to, and here's what I would say the best case scenario defending McCaffrey would be. You can limit him to under 4 yards a carry, because I think that they're going to give him the ball on first down. They're probably going to give him the ball on second down. But if you can limit him to under 4 yards a carry, and then you're putting San Francisco in third and medium type situations, or even the occasional third and long, then at that point, they might not give him the ball quite as much. So if you can keep him to, 3 yards on first down, and they've got a 2nd and 7, and then you can get him at, 2 yards and it's a 3rd and 5, then they might say, okay, well, we might give you the ball on first down, but we're not sure we're going to give you the ball on second down or third down. That's going to be the best case scenario, I think, in limiting what he does and limiting his effectiveness inside the red zone.
Chris Jones needs to play his best game of the year. Christian McCaffrey this year, Tommy, is at an absurd almost 5.5 yards per carry, right? This isn't even factoring in his
Well,
work.
you're
as a
asking the
receiver.
front four defensively to do something, that hasn't been done this season against McCaffrey.
That's not what they do. They're one of the worst in football and a yard per
I
carry
know.
average. Yeah,
I know, but
So-
that's what
so
you're
you've
asking
got-
them to do.
You've got the best on a yards per carry average against one of the worst defenses in that category. I think it's timing as much as everything, right? Like, give him his bursts, but don't let him consistently run it for 4.5, 5 yards a carry, right? Like, if you give up 3 yards and 3 yards and 9 yards, fine, and you go with the sequence of a drive to try and limit it, which plays each one gets. And the Chiefs have done that. That's how they've been one of the best defenses, despite being one of the worst run defenses, is that's kind of what they do, right? Like, they might give up a 12-yard run, but if they can correctly time in a couple of 3-yard runs, it allows their secondary to do its thing. And so, in that sense, it is what they've been doing all year long. It's just, I don't find myself looking at Kyle Shanahan, knowing what he's been over his entire career, which is one of the best run game coaches in football, and thinking he would ever abandon that in this game.
I mean, the most carries this season
imagine.
that McCaffrey has is 22. And that was
Right.
the opening game of the season against Pittsburgh. After that, he's had a couple of games where he's ran the ball 20 times, 21 times. But the vast majority of these games have been under 20 carries. So if we're asking the Kansas City defense to do something different and limit his yards per carry, really McCaffrey carrying the ball more than 22 times, that's different than what the 49ers have done this entire season.
Yeah, a lot of those games of blowouts, you'd have to go in and look at correlation of which games he touched it fewer times when they were absolutely stomping their opponent. You know what I mean? But he's averaged 21 touches a game this year, which is the most he's had since 2020. And so it's also about him as a receiver. And it's also about being in a one-game scenario and knowing what the Chiefs are defensively. Again, I'll be shocked if he has fewer than 25 touches in this game. I'll bet it's closer to 30. And that the Chiefs, I mean, that's it for you, right? Like, I think if you're Kansas City, you can trust your secondary to not let the receivers. Now, Debo after the catch is a different animal, right? But like, this doesn't feel like a Brandon Ayuk game to me. It doesn't feel like a Debo game. Debo could break one off. It's always hard to say he's not going to have a good
Debo
game.
out of the backfield is probably
Out of the
way that they're
backfield.
gonna
Yes,
utilize
that's the
him.
problem. Yep, that's the problem. And so, you Kittle, I think you can trust your secondary enough to just sort of do their job against Ayuk and Kittle. So then it does become a Debo McCaffrey thing, but more about Debo, right, as a dynamic type player than a line up and just, catch passes. I don't know what I think still. We'll get through this before the end of the week. So much of this is going to depend on the Chiefs injury report. It really is. Like, so much of this, because I don't think San Francisco's dealing with much of anything right now in that front. And so we'll watch it. We start to get injury reports tomorrow, I think, and then we'll have, or maybe even Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I think we start getting them Wednesday. I don't remember if the Super Bowl's different. Sometimes they do different stuff, but we'll have to just sort of see where the Chiefs are health-wise.
I want to see him be able to
game.
work in Jerick McKinnon. Hopefully he's healthy
They
enough to a
will.
point to where he can play in that game.
Yeah, if he's healthy, they'll work him in. I mean, he's too much of a weapon, and that's like what they do, right? They love to use McKinnon in these big spots on a couple of plays to try to get him in space. I think they absolutely will. And you wouldn't activate him, right? Like, you wouldn't even bring him out there if he's not fully healthy. If he plays, you've got to imagine they're not going to bring him out at half speed. Because at that point he doesn't serve you any purpose. Like, you got to be able to use him if he's going to be active on game day. So that's a good point. I think he will be a factor. It's all about the Chiefs defense, and they've got one of the best in football. I mean, honestly, like, it can be that simple, right? I think it's less about what they do on offense and more about what they do on defense, and they've been as good as any team in football this year, maybe the best. 869-1240, Chief fans. We'll have lots to talk about it throughout the week here on Super Bowl Sunday. We'll come back. Last full segment of Sports Daily coming right at you. All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. Glad to be with you on this Monday of Super Bowl week. Tommy, a story that's, I think, catching some headlines. Former coach of Patrick Mahomes. So Cliff Kingsbury's headed to Washington. I don't know what's going on. I think I've seen Cliff Kingsbury hired as somebody's offensive coordinator about 14 different times on like bottom lines and headlines. I'm very confused by all of this, but I think we're official now. It's Washington and not Vegas.
Yeah.
Somewhere else he was rumored to be coming. I don't even remember them all now, but it's Washington. A couple of things that are interesting about that have stood out are, one, Caleb Williams congratulating him, which I think people are reading a little bit too much into. I think just in general, it's more of this is a good hire and we're taking a quarterback kind of a move more than it's Washington's going to sell the farm to get Caleb Williams. Now, they could do that because I think, doesn't Caleb Williams also have ties to that area? I believe he does.
Yeah, he went to high school in D.C.
Yeah. So, like, if you're going to sell the farm to go get, I think it's fine to do that if you're Washington, and it just speaks to Chicago's position of power here in all of this. They can just stick with Fields and take a king's ransom and do whatever they want to do. But I think the Kingsbury hire is just good in general. And I know Dan Quinn has been catching some heat, like they settled on him because they didn't get who they wanted. I will tell you this. I would venture to guess that a Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury tandem will be successful in the NFL. I don't know about like next year because they traded a ton away on the defensive side. I don't know how good they're going to be next year, but in general terms, I think this will be a good, like if you're Washington and you're dealing with the mess, I like this combination of having those two guys there.
Well, you've got an extremely solid defensive play caller as the head coach, and you've got a offensive play caller that has done really good things over the course
of
his
offensive
career.
Mind, right? Like an offense, just in
right.
An offensive mind that's good.
Was Kingsbury a good NFL head coach? No, he was not. Will he get another head coaching opportunity? Maybe. If this goes well for him in Washington, he might. I think that this is a chance for him to sort of improve upon his reputation in the NFL. And I don't think it's a bad reputation. I just don't think that he did himself any favors in Arizona, because keep in mind, he went there with the thought of working with Kyler Murray, and that tandem, Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury, to be a really, really successful pairing in the NFL. That didn't happen. That didn't work out in the way that he wanted it to. So he can go to a place like Washington, and make no mistake about it, he's not going to Washington if they're not taking a quarterback. I mean, he's not going there he's not going to Washington to work with Sam Howell. That's not the way that it's going to be. So he goes to Washington, I think, with the understanding that they're going to take a quarterback. Who better to take Caleb Williams, a guy that he's worked with in the past and a guy that is from that area? I mean, it's pretty easy to connect those dots.
I agree. I just don't know if it's going to be Caleb Williams. It could be Drake May, but it's going to be a quarterback. I think for sure that's the thing. Like, the connection is fun to think about, and I kind of hope that it happens just because. But Cliff Kingsbury is going to be fine, and you'd want him no matter what young quarterback you had, right? If I had to tell you you're going to draft a first-year quarterback, who would you like to pair them with? There aren't very many names ahead of Kingsbury on that list. And, people laugh at his success all the time. Just listen to what his peers say. There's been multiple times, one of them, Andy Reid, when he was asked about, like, who do you take from and all that, he brought up Kingsbury before Kingsbury was ever even, a hot name of somebody he went and, like, borrowed from and tinkered with. And, coaches do that kind of stuff. So I'm intrigued by it. I like it. I think that, maybe they did settle on Dan Quinn to some degree, but man, don't forget where they're coming from and the chaotic nature. Like, to go from Ron Rivera to Dan Quinn is about as just like, let's just keep stability and let's not have anything crazy happen. That's about as close. It's funny too that, Ron Rivera could now replace Dan Quinn with Dallas. They're interviewing Mike Zimmer. Jerry Jones is all in is to bring in a bunch of old heads defensively.
How do you feel about that? I saw the Mike Zimmer news, and I wondered what you thought about Mike Zimmer.
I used to be a big Zimmer guy. I thought he should have been the coach, not Jason Garrett. I think he is a good coach. But with the old guys, you just have to wonder if they're, can you keep up with connecting with your players, right? Some can and some cannot. And so that worries me slightly. I don't know. I don't know how much that would help or hurt. I've seen a lot of things that stylistically it would be a good fit based on the players that Dallas has. I used to be a Zimmer guy, so I'd be fine with it. Yeah, it's whatever. No big deal. I don't know how much of an impact it's actually going to have, but we'll see. We'll cross that bridge when they actually hire one. 869-1240. We'll come back. We'll tell you what's on the network when we return. All right, welcome back, everybody. And, well, welcome back for a goodbye. We've got Jim Rome from 11 to 2, Bob and Jeff locally. Zach Gelb takes you from 4 to 6. And then it's a busy night of programming here on KFH. You've got the Terry Nooner Show from 6 to 7, the Paul Mills Show from 7 to 8, and then K-State, KU basketball right here, 8 o'clock. Looking forward to it. Tommy, it'll be a fun one. Lot to learn from this game tonight in the Sunflower Showdown.
Yeah, I can't wait to have reaction tomorrow from the game. It's going to be crazy.
We'll see you then. We'll have Dan Israel on tomorrow as well from Las Vegas. So that'll begin our Super Bowl interviews. So we'll do that tomorrow. See you then, everybody.